Hello and welcome to Legislative Report. I'm State Representative Mark Gillen of the 128th District in Berks and Lancaster counties. On today's program, we'll be learning about the Pennsylvania Department of General Services. It exists to support the business operations of our government, procuring goods and services, operating the state vehicle fleet, buying or selling state property and buildings, and providing police and security services are only a small portion of the duties they perform. Joining me today is Curt Topper, Secretary of the PA Department of General Services. Curt, welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
We were just sharing before we started that you are a Lancaster resident and you live near Lidditz in Manheim Township.
That's true.
You've lived there all your life, or is this more recent?
It's a little more recent.
Right.
When I was appointed to this position, we moved the family back from Washington, D.C.
Okay.
And my wife grew up in Lancaster. And one of the conditions of us moving back to PA and taking this role was that we had to live in Lancaster.
Oh, that's a wonderful decision.
Yeah.
I mentioned to you we were down and took a vacation day in Lidditz. Wilbur Chocolates was definitely on the agenda for us. I have 5 daughters, and the most discussed subject in our house is chocolate. It's a lovely town. We did some Christmas shopping. They have a great secondhand store there. I don't know if you recall that. It's run by some religious order, and very reasonably priced, and a good Mexican restaurant also there.
Yeah, I'm familiar with Lidditz. We get downtown quite often. It's great. The Bull's Head Tavern's another great favorite of mine.
All right. I'm going to guess that most people that are watching this program don't know much about the work that you do or the department that you oversee. Could you give us a broad canvas of what your job is all about?
Sure. So the Department of General Services consists of about 850 state employees who are engaged in any number of behind-the-scenes functions. We're not really public-facing for the most part. It's our job to provide the goods and the services and the infrastructure that make it possible for the other agencies of state government to do their jobs better. So that means we run the state fleet, we do procurement for goods and services, we do public works construction, we build state buildings, we're the state's real estate agent, we handle the state's risk and insurance fund. It's really it's probably 100 different lines of business. It's sort of like running a small behind-the-scenes conglomerate.
What's your background? What led you to this point to be the secretary?
Well, during the Rendell administration, I served as a deputy secretary in DGS, overseeing procurement functions. And then I went back into the private sector after the Rendell years, and I was honored to be called by the transition team and by Governor Wolf when he was first elected. And it was great to come back to PA, and I haven't regretted it for a second.
Your secretary is a cabinet level position. You sit on meetings with other secretaries, administration officials?
Sure, all the time.
All right. How do you engage them? In other words, we think of the Secretary of Transportation, various other secretaries, that seemingly more of a high-profile position. How do you interact with the rest of the team and in those meetings?
Well, so I see every one of my colleagues in the cabinet as a customer.
Okay.
We provide goods and services for those agencies, and it's important. You know, our mission is to make their jobs easier. We have a set of enterprise goals that are really important to the governor and to the taxpayers. Over the last 4 years, we've actually pooled about $300 million in savings out of the state's supply chain. And that's $300 million that state agencies have been able to redeploy to spend on more important investments. So if we bring down the cost of office copiers or office supplies, that money can then go into textbooks.
So there's business acumen you're bringing to the table here, because when one thinks of government in general, it's unfortunate people consider there to be a lot of waste. But what you're saying is you're trying to ferret out that waste.
Absolutely, every day. That's a mission.
All right, it's the taxpayers' money, of course. I walk around this building on a regular basis. I don't think that I have been to every nook and cranny of the building, but you have to know all of those remote places in the building, and they need attention. This is an older building.
I think that's one thing that's not fully understood about the state capitol complex. We really do live and work in a fine art museum in many respects. And so the infrastructure that's required in order to maintain this one-of-a-kind treasure for all Pennsylvanians is significant. There's a huge team behind the scenes that is making sure that all of our offices are comfortable, making sure that we adequately maintain just this beautiful building. One of the things I get to do in this role is I get to sit on the Capital Preservation Committee. And that's a great joy in this job because I get to play a role in the restoration of truly one-of-a-kind spaces within the Capitol complex. I couldn't be prouder of the team that does the work every day to keep the lights on and to keep the place running here.
I was part of a tour yesterday in the building. You mentioned keeping the lights on. In the House chamber. I look at those giant chandeliers. I think one of them they said is the weight of an African elephant and the
That's
other
right.
of a hippopotamus, and that always amazes the young people that come in. But the care of this building is so much different than other buildings because of its age and its uniqueness. I mentioned, I think it's 23 karat gold on the ceiling. How do you maintain a core of workers that has the skill set for a building like this?
Well, a lot of the restoration work is done by specialists,
Okay.
and that's funded through the CPC as opposed to directly through
Okay.
DGS. Most of the work that DGS does here in the Capitol complex is more routine maintenance around the building. Although you mentioned those chandeliers, one of the major efforts we've had underway in the last 2 years is retrofitting and bringing in LED lighting across the Capitol complex. So all those chandeliers that you mentioned, all the lighting throughout the Capitol is now LED,
Okay.
which has significantly reduced our energy consumption here in the Capitol complex. And it's also reduced our maintenance costs because the LED lights actually last significantly longer than the old incandescent bulbs.
So in the House chamber itself, there's actually thousands of light bulbs, from what I understand, substantial numbers in those chandeliers. Okay, so I can read a little bit easier now that we've gone to the new lighting. It's not, yeah, it's
Well,
a challenge.
You tell me.
I'm in a different seat now than
Yeah.
I was last year, so I'm trying to figure this out. But relative to the House chamber, the Senate chamber, the governor's reception room, there is this nexus of the Capital Preservation Committee. Do you know when that came into being and how it dovetails with the general maintenance function? Let's take the canvases, the paintings, for instance, in the
Yeah.
governor's reception room. So you've got Capital Preservation Committee specialists coming in and maintaining those so they can endure for generations.
Yes. So the Capital Preservation Committee is chaired by Senator Gordner, and the committee meets, I think, every other month or so. They have a budget that they allocate for restoration projects in and around the Capitol complex. I don't want to speak for the for the committee staff or for the committee, but would they have a priority list of projects that need to be done in order to ensure that we maintain this treasure for generations to come. It's great work that they do, and it's really worthwhile.
I walk around the building some days, and I look down at the floor, and I see Mercer Tile.
Yeah.
And I lived in Bucks County for many years. In fact, I was a correctional officer at the prison there, and across from the prison, I was a Sallyport officer. Across from the prison, you had the Mercer Mile, Font Hill, his home, Moravian Pottery and Tile Works, and then the Mercer Museum, which is castle-like in its appearance. And I walk around this building, I look down at those Mercer tiles, and I look at these murals and engravings and statues, And sometimes I just have to pinch myself and say, I can't believe that I'm working in the middle of this museum. Do you ever have that sense yourself?
All the time. All the time. I really try to encourage everyone who comes to the Capitol and everyone who works in the Capitol to look around, right? I think there's a tendency, because you come here every day, there's almost a tendency to begin to take for granted the treasure that is the Pennsylvania Capitol. I used to work as a consultant working for state governments, and I had the opportunity to travel around to a bunch of different state capitals all over the country. And I can honestly tell you, ours is by far the most beautiful.
Could you repeat that again? Right.
Yeah, and it really is an extraordinary treasure, and it's irreplaceable. So it's really important that we take care of it.
Capital Preservation Committee, all right. So you have this 23 karat gold, you have these murals, you have these paintings. Are there ever really robust discussions, technical discussions about the best approach to preserving what we have? I know we had the Civil War flags in cases out there, and then they disappeared, and then they were being treated and maintained, and I don't think they're still out in the Rotunda era, not in terms of friction or a tug of war, but contrasting perspectives on how to display or maintain. Are those kind of robust discussions going on behind the scenes?
I think we have really an exceptionally good working relationship today between the administration, DGS, and the Capital Preservation Committee. We've been working arm in arm on plans to renovate the Forum building, which has sat vacant for the last couple of decades. I'm very excited about being able to make the capital investment to restore that building to its former glory and to repopulate it. And the Capital Preservation Committee has been involved there. You mentioned the Civil War flags, which are truly irreplaceable. There are a handful of them still in the Rotunda, but the majority of them have been stored off-site at a facility on Market Street. That facility hasn't been adequate to fully preserve the flags. So one of the things we've worked with the CPC over the last 2 years on is finding an alternative location, which we have done. And DGS put up free of charge space at our facility at 22nd and Forster Street in Harrisburg. And we are now in the process of building a proper storage facility, in effect a building within a building, that will create the correct climate, the correct security to make sure that those flags are preserved for many generations to come, because they're a one-of-a-kind treasure.
The Forum building is vacant. Historically, what was that used for, just to bring us up to speed?
So it was originally it's not completely vacant. The performance space is used all the time.
And I was there, yeah.
And there are a handful of Department of Education functions there, the State Library, but the upper floors have been vacant for some time.
Okay.
I think it was last occupied by the Department of Transportation after the fire, before the completed construction of the Keystone Building. It is the historic home of the Pennsylvania Department of Education going way back. So our plan is to fully renovate the building and then reduce our lease footprint. So we currently, while that building has sat vacant, the Commonwealth has been leasing property in Harrisburg and around Harrisburg for agency operations. And once we've completed that capital project, we'll be able to contract that lease footprint and move various agency operations back into state-owned property, which in the long run is a lot more cost-effective.
And that's what we like to hear about.
That's, I think our mission at DGS is basically, to make government more efficient, more effective, and help it to operate more safely. That's what we do day in and day out, and a big part of that is finding ways to reduce our costs.
Great. I occasionally run into young people who ask me, about the dome. I think it's 282 feet. It's modeled after St. Peter's Basilica.
Yeah.
It's not as big. It's similar to it. And occasionally they say, well, how do you get up there? Now, I heard that there's a way up there, so this is inside ball. in terms of accessing, but it may not be something that you're familiar with, but in terms of nooks and crannies around the Capitol complex, you ever get to a place and you're like, wow, I didn't realize this was here?
All the time. So I have been lucky enough to get all the way up into the dome.
Okay.
Right. So there's a space in between the inner dome and the outer dome, which is a place most folks don't get to see. And there's a series of catwalks and ladders and things like that that feel a little bit like a scene out of a Harry Potter movie.
Okay.
And that's kind of fun. Underneath Soldiers Grove, out, between the finance
Across
building and the forum.
Yeah.
Right. We have a chiller plant. Just 2 weeks ago, Governor Wolf and I had an opportunity to walk down into the chiller plant and go visit with the DGS staff there that is currently operating the chiller plant. Basically, that plant, it's underground, and it's providing all of the air conditioning, for the entire Capitol complex. It's quite an impressive facility, and we have underway a big project to renovate the equipment down there and replace it with much more cost-efficient, energy-efficient equipment, which is why we invited the governor to come down, and it was a great couple of hours. I think he's probably the only governor who's actually walked through the tunnels to get to the chiller plant and to visit with the staff down there underground.
And I'm one of the few state representatives who's been down there also. And
how about that? Okay, so you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I was interested in what was underneath there because of what we were contemplating in terms of memorial on the ground side, which I know dovetailing that legislatively, we wanted to step into the 21st century in terms of monuments and memorializing those great heroes over in the soldiers and sailors memorial area. But we realized that there was a constraint based on what was below ground, how much weight you could put, where you could put it, the ability to have to bring equipment up out of the ground there. And so working as a team, I went down with Department of General Services employees to see what was down there. It was fascinating. So that's DGS language, the chiller plant, right?
That's right.
I call it the air conditioning.
Fair enough.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, it's well then, so you're familiar with it. I mean, when you look at Soldiers Grove from above ground, it just looks like a field, right?
Right.
You don't realize it's actually a roof.
It is. Yeah, it is for a very enormous and complicated, complex down there.
Yeah.
Okay, we've talked about the footprint just yards from where we're seated today, but you're coast to coast. You're Ohio to New Jersey. I mean, you're New York to Maryland to West Virginia. What's going on with the portfolio of buildings and real estate and holdings the state has in other places? Can you quantify how many buildings, how many acres, just ballpark, lots of them out there? And you move from this building, you visit in other locations, you have liaisons. So let's talk macro for a few moments here.
Sure. So the state is a much larger enterprise than I think folks at home might realize, right? All in, the state owns about 7 or 8 million square feet of office, warehouse, facilities like space, right? Across all of the agencies. And then in addition to that, the Commonwealth leases another 7 to 7.5 million square feet of similar space, including every LCB store in the Commonwealth.
Liquor Control Board.
All the Liquor Control Board.
Right.
All of those retail establishments are leased, and they're leased through DGS. So my team negotiates all of the leases on behalf of LCB. So that gives you a sense of the magnitude. That's everything including state hospitals and state police barracks and PennDOT regional headquarters and all of the above, right?
How much of a tug is there on you? Like, we need renovation, we need lighting, we need insulation, whatever. Okay, is it a real challenge to prioritize and to get some field input and say, this one really needs to be taken care of now?
I think there's a give and take with all of our agency customers every year. We have to work within certain capital constraints. We're trying to be careful. The governor has really since day one has wanted to be very judicious about the amount of capital debt that we take on. So we've actually we have capped agency capital project spending at a level that is significantly lower than previous administrations. Across all of the agencies of the Commonwealth, we're spending about $180 to $200 million a year on capital renovations and capital projects, which, across a portfolio of 8 million square feet, is actually not that much, particularly when you consider the aging infrastructure that we're talking about. Many of these facilities were built, 50, 75, 100 years ago. So yeah, there's a give and take every day with the agencies. They all have priorities. We try to work with them to shuffle those priorities in order to meet what's urgent. But there is a significant deferred maintenance challenge that we're working with. We're not the only state. As you know, resources are tight. No one wants to raise taxes. So we're going to work with what we have.
All right. Do you ever get to a point where somebody says to you, Mr. Secretary, Curt, let's just have a candid conversation. This one's past maintenance improvement. All right, we just need to divest here. And, I'm sure on the other side there's some great affection for this building, its history. I've always worked here. Some tougher calls in saying, we're just going to have to give this one up. We're going to sell this one. We're going to let it go.
Sure. So a lot of the decision-making around which facilities to maintain and keep and which facilities to divest from are really in the hands of the agencies that I serve, right? My customers. Okay. So DHS is going to decide, if and when it makes sense for them to divest of, buildings on a state hospital grounds. Once they've decided that it's time to move their operations, that's where we come in. We come in when it comes to the disposition of the real estate, so we will come in and take the property and help get it sold so that we can hopefully get the property back on the tax rolls locally, so that we can get out from under any carrying costs that we have in order to maintain the property. We'll also work with the agency to figure out where they're going to move. If they need to build new or lease new, our team really gets engaged there to help the agencies figure out where they need to be.
You have a lease portfolio also, property. You've got to rely on a lot of people out there to say, hey, we really need this. Maybe we could consolidate. We've got some empty offices here. So it's a little bit of juggling going on.
Oh, for sure. One of the big initiatives we've had has been we call them MABLEs, or multi-agency building leases, right? We've been working very hard with our agency customers to try to consolidate their operations put like with like, and consolidate operations into the same buildings. Because the state workforce has actually gotten smaller, and we need to shrink the real estate portfolio at the same time so that we can get out from under those costs. And it has the other benefit of creating more of a one-stop shop type of scenario for the people, for the citizens of Pennsylvania who need to come and interface with our agencies, so they can go to one location for multiple needs.
You mentioned divesting of real estate. There's opportunities to sell. It's no longer needed. Buying real estate, how often are we doing that?
Well, the only time we ever really buy real estate is in the context of a new capital project. So we are presently preparing to break ground on the new State Archives facility here in Harrisburg. You may be familiar with the old archives facility here on the Capitol campus. It's that huge tower that sits in between the Keystone Building and the State Museum.
Where everybody drives by and say, what in the world is that thing?
Exactly.
Yeah, I've done the same thing myself.
Right, so that is the Pennsylvania State Archives. And for many years, it's been apparent that PHMC, the Pennsylvania Historic Museum Commission, needed a new facility in which to house the state archives. And the prior administration was in the process of getting that new facility built just outside of Harrisburg. One of the initiatives the Wolf administration took was to move that capital project back into the city. Again, because we have a real interest in making sure that we have downtown locations for state facilities. And our team engaged in an effort to identify the property within the city that was necessary and to acquire all the property that was necessary in order to build the new archives facility. And we'll be breaking ground on that here. It's in Midtown Harrisburg, probably this summer.
Are there not some archives being stored on the Irvis building? I'm thinking up on the 6th floor. Is that a temporary repository, or is that something distinctive?
That may be the legislators.
Legislative archives?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, that may be a separate branch.
That's less important. We don't need a new building for that. It looks like
well,
pretty comfortable there.
I am excited about the work we've been doing to renovate the Irvis building.
Okay.
And it's been a great team effort between the General Assembly and DGS. We've been using DGS resources in order to renovate several floors in the Irvis building to make those habitable again for legislators.
Could you make sure that you upgrade 418 Irvis building? That's where. No, it's fine. I came. That was my office. It's still my office. I see no need to change. They said if you're eligible to go somewhere else or get an upgrade. I'm perfectly comfortable there. Just need one chair, one desk, and that one computer.
It's funny, Representative. This is the range of this job, right? And one of the reasons I love it is because there's so much variety. There's a different challenge every day, but my day can go from negotiating a $100 million contract to hearing from a member of the General Assembly about how their office is uncomfortable.
Okay.
And I need to fix both.
We're wrapping up. So how often do you hear from members of the General Assembly saying, I need a little something? You've never heard from me, by the way.
No, not at all.
It's occasional.
No, and the thing is that I see myself as the #1 customer service agent for my agency. I want to hear from members of the General Assembly and from all of my customers about ways that we can do better, ways that we can improve our operation, ways that we can deliver more value, and whether that's a comfort call here in the Capitol complex, or it's trying to drive millions of dollars out of our supply chain, or it's building a new facility. All of those things, for me, are about the opportunity to basically better serve the public.
I've enjoyed being your customer.
Wonderful.
I'm State Representative Mark Gillen. If you have questions about what we've discussed today, feel free to contact me at my local office or through my website. That information will be shown in a moment. Thanks for watching, and please join me next time for Legislative Report.